The studio buzzed with energy, the kind that fills the air right before something funny, outrageous, or headline-worthy happens. A sea of smiling faces filled the audience, phones half-raised, laughter already spilling before a word was spoken. The host leaned comfortably against his desk, his grin wide, his tone playful. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, dragging out the pause just enough, "please welcome the man with the smolder, the mystery, the memes, Ryan Gosling." The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, a few people rose to their feet. Cameras zoomed in as Ryan walked onto the stage, that quiet half-smile on his face, one hand in his pocket, the other giving a small wave. He wasn't one for big entrances. Never had been. He sat down across from the host, adjusting his jacket slightly. The host leaned in. "You're too cool, man. Always so composed. What's the secret? Meditation? Alien genetics? Or just Canadian charm?" Laughter. Gosling smiled. "Bit of all three, I guess." The host nodded theatrically. "Well, we thought we'd bring back a little something from your past, for the fans, of course." The screen behind them lit up a large childhood photo of Ryan, maybe 7 years old, in a glittery silver costume. Wings on his back. Arms frozen mid-dance. The crowd laughed, not cruelly, but instinctively. "Would you look at that," the host exclaimed. "So the future action hero used to be a sparkly swan." More laughter. Ryan smiled politely. "Said nothing," the host continued, clearly enjoying the moment. "No wonder you're so graceful in fight scenes. Ballet will do that to you." He winked. The audience chuckled again, and then came the teasing. "Are you always this quiet, or is it just an act? Ever think of doing a comedy where people actually talk? Dude, you're like a ghost just there in the background, making sad eyes." One of the other celebrity guests chimed in, laughing. "He's like a shadow, always there, but no one really notices." It got a big laugh. A sharp one. Too sharp. Ryan didn't blink. He didn't shift. He sat with his back straight, his fingers calmly laced together in his lap. He didn't look angry. He looked steady. The host leaned forward. "Too quiet for you?" And then, as the noise softened, something shifted. Ryan took a breath, one of those breaths that fills the whole body before a truth comes out. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even change his tone. But everyone felt it before he even spoke. "I was 12 when I got beat up for dancing." Silence. The laughter died. He looked straight ahead. Not at the host. Not at the camera. Just, into the room. "I stayed quiet because I thought my voice didn't matter. At 16, I used to sit at the kitchen table every night, wondering why I existed. At 20, I nearly jumped off a hotel balcony in Toronto." Nobody moved. For a few seconds, after Ryan Gosling said it, "I nearly jumped off a hotel balcony in Toronto," the room became heavier than air. Something cracked beneath the surface of the show. The illusion that this was just another breezy, late-night segment, another string of laughs and light banter vanished. What remained was a truth too raw to ignore. Ryan didn't blink. Didn't shift in his seat. His hands stayed calmly folded in his lap. "What stopped me," he said, his voice still measured, but now deeper, as if it came from someplace farther inside. "It wasn't someone knocking on the door. It wasn't a friend calling at the right moment. It wasn't a therapist. It was a song." The audience held still, no words. Just a melody. A piano, soft, uneven, like it had been broken and put back together again. And in the space between the notes, he paused, as if hearing it again. It said something I hadn't heard from anyone in years. It said, "I hear you." He didn't look at the host. He didn't look at the other guests. He looked past them, as if speaking to someone who wasn't in the room, or maybe to the version of himself who had once stood on that balcony, convinced no one would ever understand. "I grew up quiet," he continued. "And when you grow up quiet, people don't ask if you're okay. They assume you are. You're polite. You don't complain. You don't make scenes. You just, carry it. And people love that about you. They love how easy you are. How low maintenance. But they never ask where all of it goes, all the unspoken hurt, the questions, the moments you wanted to scream but didn't. A murmur of realization rippled through the crowd, not words, just breath. The quiet sort of agreement that happens when someone speaks something you've never dared admit aloud. People ask me all the time why I don't talk much in interviews, Ryan said. Why I give short answers. Why I pause before speaking. And the truth is, I had to teach myself that my words mattered. I had to learn that when I spoke, I wasn't wasting anyone's time. He looked down briefly, then up again, this time meeting the host's eyes. Not in confrontation. In clarity. When I was a kid, I danced, he said. That photo you showed earlier, the costume, the wings, the silver makeup, it's real. And I loved it. But I learned early that the world doesn't know what to do with boys like that. They don't know what to do with softness, or quiet, or boys who'd rather move than shout. The host had gone pale. He swallowed but didn't interrupt. His hands were clenched together on the desk now, fingers tight. Ryan continued, his voice quieter now, not because it lost strength, but because it was arriving somewhere more fragile. I was bullied. Not just by kids. By adults. By coaches. Teachers. Even family. I started shrinking in my posture, in my voice, in my presence. I thought that was survival. And in a way, it was. But it also taught me to disappear from my own life. A young man in the front row who'd been laughing earlier now sat with tears in his eyes, nodding slowly. Ryan's words felt like confession, but not for pity. They were an offering. I'm not telling you this to be dramatic. Or to make tonight heavy. I'm telling you because someone watching this somewhere needs to know they're not broken for being quiet. They're not weak because they don't fire back. They're not lesser because they feel more than they can say. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn piece of paper. Folded many times. He held it for a moment, rubbing his thumb across the edge. I wrote this in my journal the day after Toronto. I've carried it with me since. He unfolded it. His fingers were steady. On it, in faint ink, it said, if no one hears you, be the echo. He looked up. His voice didn't tremble. I became an actor not because I loved being seen. But because it gave me characters to hide behind, people louder than I was, braver, sharper. It was my way of speaking without using my own voice. Now the silence wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Every ear leaned in. Every breath slowed. But now, he said, setting the paper gently on the host's desk, I don't want to hide behind them anymore. If my silence can speak to someone else's loneliness, then maybe it was never silence to begin with. Maybe it was waiting. Waiting for the moment someone would finally listen. He leaned back. Not triumphant. Not emotional. Just still. Rooted. The host, speechless, stared at the paper. One of the other guests, the one who joked about Ryan being a shadow, took off his mic quietly, set it on the couch. No applause. Just stillness. And somewhere in the back of the studio, a young woman rose to her feet, her voice trembled. I haven't spoken in a classroom in 2 years, she said. People call me weird. Quiet. Cold. But I'm not. I'm just full of things I can't say out loud. She looked at Ryan. You just said them for me. And Ryan, for the first time that night, truly smiled. A real one. The kind that comes from being heard. The show ended without music. No signature laugh track, no closing monologue, no wink to the audience. Just a long, low silence that hung in the room like fog. The host didn't crack a final joke. He didn't even say goodbye. He just sat there, still staring at the folded piece of paper Ryan Gosling had placed on his desk. If no one hears you, be the echo. Ryan stood and walked off stage without looking back. The crew didn't stop him. No one tried. Some nodded as he passed. One makeup artist mouthed the words, "Thank you." The video went online before the episode even aired. An intern posted it, not for clicks, but because they couldn't sleep after watching it live. The caption read simply, "He didn't raise his voice." But somehow, we all heard him. The clip spread like fire through dry grass. But it wasn't viral in the way most celebrity clips were. It didn't blow up with memes or parodies. It moved differently, slow, heavy, deliberate. Like something people didn't just share but sent to someone they loved. Comments poured in, "My son never talks. But he watched this 3 times. I thought I was broken because I'm quiet. Now I think maybe I'm just waiting. I didn't cry when my dad left. I didn't cry when I lost my job. But I cried watching this. Because someone finally said what I never could." The hashtags came next. Not a trend, a language, hashtag #msilent2, hashtag be the echo, hashtag one voice enough. The clip played on school projectors. It showed up in inboxes from people who hadn't spoken in years. It became a mirror and people saw themselves in it, but Ryan stayed silent. No tweets. No statements. He wasn't trying to lead a movement. He wasn't trying to become something new. He had simply spoken when the moment asked for honesty. And now the world was answering with its own quiet truths. A few days later, Ryan visited a small theater in Toronto. No press, no entourage. Just a black hoodie and a ticket under a different name. It was a local show, young actors, folding chairs and paper programs. He sat in the back. Afterward, as the crowd spilled onto the sidewalk, someone tapped his arm. A girl. 16, maybe 17. Long sleeves. Quiet eyes. She didn't say a word. Just handed him something. A folded piece of lined notebook paper. He took it carefully. Opened it. Inside, written in uncertain handwriting, "I was silent too. Now I'm not." She didn't ask for a photo. Didn't linger. Just nodded, turned, and disappeared into the crowd. He stood there for a long time, paper still in hand. Then, slowly, he pulled out his wallet. Opened it. Slipped the note in beside the one he'd written so many years ago. 2 pieces of paper. 2 hearts speaking without speaking, and in that moment, he realized something. This wasn't just about him, this silence he had lived with for so long. It was shared. It had a shape. A sound. A name, and now, it had become a movement. He didn't ask for it. He didn't want it. But it came anyway. Box after box, message after message. Within 2 weeks of the broadcast, Ryan Gosling's team was overwhelmed. They tried to filter the responses, to make it manageable, but the mailroom at his agency became a sanctuary of unheard voices. Some came in envelopes sealed with trembling hands. Others were emails sent at 2:47 a.m. with no subject line. Many began the same way, "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but," and he did. He read all of them. Every letter they never thought anyone would read. He sat at his kitchen table for hours, surrounded by the silence he had once been so afraid of, now filled with the voices of people who had spent years hiding their hurt behind a smile. A silence, a seat in the back of the room. A boy from Nebraska wrote, "I haven't spoken in school since 7th grade. When I saw you say it was okay to be quiet, I told my mom I want to try." A woman from Greece said, "My father never let me speak at the table. I still feel like my words don't matter. But your words felt like they were mine." One came from a prison in Texas, another from a hospital in Kyoto. One from a child in hospice, all of them different, all of them the same, and among them was a small, almost unnoticeable envelope. No return address. Just his name, handwritten in pencil. Inside, "I was going to leave tonight. I had everything ready. But I turned on the TV. And you were there. You didn't save me. But you reminded me I could save myself. So I'm staying. One more day." He sat with that one for a long time. Then folded it carefully. Pressed it flat. Slipped it beside the others. His collection was growing. Not of trophies or awards but echoes. That week, a foundation reached out. They wanted to name a mental health initiative after him. He declined. Politely. Gratefully. Then quietly donated every dollar they offered to a youth crisis hotline anonymously. Reporters kept calling. Publishers sent proposals. TV hosts wanted him back for a follow-up conversation. He said no to all of it, because he knew, this wasn't about a sequel. It wasn't about branding the moment, this was about the girl who handed him the note, about the boy in Nebraska, about the grown man in prison who hadn't cried in 20 years until he watched a quiet actor say the thing he'd waited his whole life to hear, and yet, the world kept listening. At first it was just a few schools. Then entire districts. Then cities. Teachers creating echo walls in classrooms where students could write something they've never said out loud. Libraries started silent reading hours dedicated to books by introverts, poets, the soft-spoken, and then something even stranger happened. People began writing letters to themselves. I forgive you for staying quiet. You were never invisible. Just unheard. You didn't need to shout. You just needed time. Ryan saw this and said nothing. But inside, something was changing, not the old silence, the one born of shame. But a new one. One rooted in peace, and it was in that peace that he made a decision, not for a stage, not for a spotlight, but for the people who had written letters they never thought anyone would read, that he would write back, not to all. He couldn't. But to some point, one by one. Slowly. By hand, that he cleared a room in his home. Bought a desk. Paper. Envelopes. No assistance. No help. Just him, a pen, and the same voice he thought once didn't matter, and somewhere, someone opened their mailbox and found a letter. The return address was blank. The signature was simple, R. Inside, in careful handwriting, your silence never meant you were weak, that it meant you were surviving, now you're ready to speak, and I'm listening. The invitation came in a plain envelope. No logo. No celebrity agent. Just one sentence, typed in the center of the page: would you come speak to us? Underneath, handwritten in small blue ink, we don't talk much. But we still listen. It was from a school, not a prestigious academy or a press-filled event, but a quiet public school on the outskirts of Minneapolis. A special program for kids with speech anxiety, selective mutism, and trauma-induced silence. Children who had words, but couldn't yet use them. The teacher who sent the letter included no emotional appeal. No flattery. Just honesty. We watched your video. Some of them cried. Some didn't move. One boy started humming. That was the first sound we'd heard from him all year. Ryan read it 3 times. He didn't hesitate. That he arrived unannounced. No photographers. No press. Just him, a coat, and a notebook in his hand. The principal met him at the door, eyes wide with disbelief. Ryan shook his head gently. No announcements. No crowd. Just, let them be themselves. She nodded. The classroom wasn't like most. No raised hands. No shouting. No group chants or clapping songs. Just small desks, soft lighting, and a corner filled with beanbags and books. No one was forced to read aloud. There were 9 students that day. When Ryan stepped in, no one said a word. No one needed to. He didn't begin with a speech. He sat down on the floor. Cross-legged. Opened his notebook. Looked up. I was quiet too, he said. A girl in the back glanced up from her drawing. A boy near the window paused mid-rock in his chair. Another kept staring at his shoelaces but had stopped fidgeting. Ryan looked around the room. People used to ask me why I never talked. They thought I was stuck up. Or stupid. Or scared. But really, I just didn't know where to put all the feelings I had. He opened his notebook. Inside were the letters people had sent him. Not the originals, just copies he'd written out by hand. I brought some of your voices with me, he said. I don't know your names, but maybe your hearts will recognize something here. He read one. Slowly. I stay quiet because when I speak, I feel like I'm breaking the air. Like my voice doesn't belong in the room. Another, I whisper in my head all day. It's loud in there. But out here. I'm scared to open my mouth. A small hand went up. Gently. Uncertain. A girl with curly hair and 2 fingers pressed to her lips. Ryan turned to her, she didn't speak. Just nodded slowly, then she stood. Walked to the front of the room. Picked up the notebook. Turned to a blank page. And wrote one word, same. Ryan nodded. Whispered, thank you. That broke something open. Not in noise and permission. One by one, students stood. Not to speak, but to write. To draw. To sit beside him in silence that felt like safety. By the end of the hour, the notebook wasn't his anymore. It belonged to them. Covered in quiet echoes, sketches, names, short phrases, unfinished thoughts. One boy simply drew a small door, slightly open. Before leaving, Ryan sat with them one last time. I want you to remember something, he said. Being quiet doesn't mean being invisible. You are here. You are heard. Even if it takes time to find the words, we're still listening. He left the notebook behind, and on the inside cover, he wrote, to the ones the world forgot to hear, this space is yours now. Fill it any way you need to. R. That evening, the teacher sent him a photo. The boy who hadn't spoken all year, he was whispering to the notebook that he hadn't spoken publicly in months, that he didn't need to. The moment had passed, or so it seemed. The video was still being shared, the letters still arrived at his door, the notebook from the school still sat on his shelf like something sacred. But the noise had quieted. The world, as it does, moved on, but the echoes stayed. They came in quiet forms. A crayon drawing from a child in Sweden, a boy with no mouth, standing next to another who held his hand. A voice message from a father whose teenage son hadn't spoken in 2 years, until he whispered, I'm here too, after watching Ryan's clip. A woman from India who had been silent since the loss of her child, now writing, your stillness helped me breathe again. And then came the letter. The one he hadn't expected. It was handwritten on thick paper, addressed in careful, uneven script, from the girl, the one from the theater in Toronto. The first to say nothing and everything. She was older now. Studying psychology. Working at a crisis center for teens. Her letter was brief. No sentimentality. Just clarity. I found my voice. But others haven't. I use mine for them now. They listen to me because you spoke first. If you ever feel ready, come speak to them yourself. There was no pressure. Just a door left gently open. He sat with the letter for days. Not in doubt and reverence, and then, quietly, he said yes. The event wasn't flashy. No cameras. No big names. It was held in a circular auditorium at a youth trauma recovery center. 300 chairs. No stage, everyone at the same level. No spotlight, just light. The people in the room weren't fans, they weren't even sure what they were walking into. They were survivors of bullying, of silence, of grief, of erasure. They didn't want a speech. They wanted truth. Ryan arrived early. Sat alone. No one recognized him at first. Hoodie pulled low, hands folded, eyes watching the door. When they announced his name, a few turned. Some blinked. One girl whispered, is that him? He stood slowly. Walked to the center of the circle. No paper. No microphone. Just breath. He looked around. Then down. Then finally up, and he began, I'm not here to inspire you. I'm not a hero. I'm not healed. I still wake up some mornings and feel like I'm fading before I open my eyes. He paused. A few leaned in. One boy 15, arms crossed, hoodie tight, stared straight ahead. But didn't look away. The night I almost ended my life, there was no one there. No parent. No friend, just a piano. A melody that broke the silence. And in between the notes, I felt heard for the first time in years. He let that sit, not understood. Not saved. Just, heard, and sometimes, that's the beginning. A woman across from him, maybe 30, maybe older, wept without moving her hands. A silent cry that didn't need attention. Just permission. Ryan looked down. Pulled something from his back pocket. The note, the one he had written at 21. He unfolded it carefully. His fingers slower now, as if the paper had become sacred with age. If no one hears you, be the echo. He held it up, then looked around the circle. I've carried this for half my life, not because it gave me answers but because it gave me something to hold when I had nothing else. He stepped forward. Gently placed the note on the ground in the center of the circle. I'm leaving it here. Because now, I think it's yours, all of yours. He stepped back. Your silence is not a flaw, that it's a space the world hasn't learned how to enter yet, but I have, and I promise you, you are not lost, you are not broken, you are not invisible. His voice trembled not from fear, but from release. You're still here, and I'm listening. A girl stood. She didn't speak. She simply walked to the note. Sat beside it. Cross-legged. Like him. Then a boy joined her. Then another. No words. Just presence. Eventually, the whole room gathered in the circle. No one spoke, some wept, some closed their eyes. One reached for another's hand and it was taken, and in that moment, the silence wasn't absence. It was unity. A language. A heartbeat. An answer. Weeks later, someone asked Ryan in an interview, the first he'd given since everything, a final question: what do you think your legacy will be? He smiled gently. Looked into the camera. And said, I used to think it would be a character I played. Or a scene. Or a quote, but now I think it's this: somewhere out there, a kid who hasn't spoken in 2 years is humming, and that's enough for me. Final frame. Black screen. White words, asterisk. He didn't start a movement. He didn't build a platform. He just told the truth, and thousands whispered back, we're here too. #I'm silent too. #be the echo. #one more day.